Each miserable day that passes, the world, the universe, inches closer to its inevitable demise. Hello, I'm Zach from World of Game Design, and today I'm going to teach you Vast Grimm, the brutal sci-fi hack of Mork Borg put out by Brian Colin at Infinite Black. Brian has been a longtime friend of mine, but I wouldn't be doing this how to play unless I felt like Vast Grimm deserved to sit right up there with some of the best RPGs currently available. It's a blast to run through. It's hella fun to write for, and I'm beyond enthusiastic to show it to you. If you already love Mork Borg and know what it's like to play, you can probably skip parts of this video, but hopefully I'm able to showcase what's different here and why you need it on your shelf. Unlike Mork Borg, Vast Grimm is sci-fi, but it keeps the apocalyptic attitude and the punk flair, maybe even dialing up the punk flair a couple notches. It leans into gonzo descriptions, locales, and character archetypes. It's about an even split between body horror and cosmic horror, but with an explosion of vibrancy. Maybe like a mixture of color out of space with Event Horizon. In the timeline of Vast Grimm, 663 years have passed since a parasitic force known as the Grimm were released from their cosmic mausoleum and set loose on the galaxy. Since then, the infection has spread rampantly, and there are but pockets of resistance left. Everything else has succumbed to the Vast Grimm host. You play as one of the few million survivors trying desperately to avoid infection and searching with nearly no hope for a reset button for the universe. It's horror, it's pulp, rules light action with a high body count and parasites infecting your form. What more could you want? Just like Mork Borg in D&D, every Fast Grim player uses a set of standard polyhedrals, and you'll be using a D20 for almost everything. Every player character has four abilities: agility, which think dexterity from D&D; strength, think strength from D&D; toughness, think constitution; and presence, which is a catch-all for wisdom, charisma, aiming a ranged weapon, piloting a ship, and wielding the potent powers of neuromancy. So the big thing to keep in mind here is that your shooting, your range stuff comes from presence, and agility is reserved for feats of athleticism, and especially for dodging and defense rolls and things like that. Your ability scores are determined by rolling 3d6 for each one, with modifiers based on which class you choose. If you have a 9 to 12 in an ability after you roll, your modifier is 0. So if your presence score is 10 and you want to fire a blaster against a giant worm, you'll roll a single d20 and add nothing because your modifier is 0. Having a score of below 9 is going to come with a negative modifier, and anything above 12 gets you a little bonus. This means it's going to be very, very common for starting characters to have several negatives and maybe only one single positive modifier. Anytime you roll for an ability test, you'll be going up against a difficulty rating, or DR, which is a target number. If you hit the target number, you're successful. Fall below, and you fail. All difficulty ratings default to 12, unless the Game Master determines otherwise. Couple this with the dismal modifiers, and you're all set for a game full of failure, at least at the beginning. As a player, you'll really want to find ways of setting the odds in your favor. With an average roll of 11 and an average modifier of 0, at base level, you'll be failing slightly more often than you'll succeed. This is a player-focused rolling system, meaning the game wants the players to be the one rolling the dice, not the GM. To make a character, you either head over to vastgrim.com and roll up a rando with the character generator, or you can begin your journey on page 23 of the core rulebook. This is a class-based game with plenty of wild options like the Manchin, the Lost Technomaniac, and the Twisted Biochemist. Each class is going to give you a small array of credits, favor points, ability modifiers, plus a little table of background info to roll on, and some sort of fancy-ish skill or class-specific item. Pro tip here, leveling up in Vast Grim is traditionally just gaining ability point boosts, but I like to optionally allow players to pick another class feature when they improve, just giving them that many more options, and it's fun, and you're not going to improve very often in Vast Grim anyways. Your hit point count is based off your class, so some classes will get toughness plus D4 hit points and health at the beginning, but some can get all the way up to toughness plus D10. This means you're probably going to start with anywhere from 2 to 6 hit points. Favors are basically just get out of jail free cards that let you maximize damage on an attack, re-roll a die, reduce incoming damage by 6, ignore a crit or a fumble, or lower the difficulty of a test by d4. Then your favors are a static number that recharge every day. So what's this neuromancy all about? Long before the concept of time, there existed neuromantic energies in the universe. It was neuromancy that originally imprisoned the Grimm in their mausoleum. Some of that energy has been contained onto data chips called tributes. Each day, you'll roll presence plus d4, and the result is how many times you can use a neuromancy from a tribute each day. Basically, tributes are like spell scrolls in D&D, but they don't go away when used. They're not consumable. And continuing the concept of player first rolling, anytime you want to use a tribute, you'll just be rolling a DR12 presence test. On a success, the effect of the tribute usually happens with no save for the target. It just works. However, there's a downside. If you fail your presence test, you immediately lose 2 hit points and become disoriented for an hour, which means you can't try to use another tribute for a while. Tributes can do a lot of crazy things, and in my experience, some of the most fun you could have as a GM is designing your own weird neuromantic mechanics to stir into the mix. There's even a special table called the Cataclysmic Condemnations for when players fail these presence tests in a big way. Another pro tip, use this table and use it often, especially in one shots. Bend the rules a bit on how it's triggered as it makes for a memorable experience every time. Last but not least, we have equipment and armor. Equipment could be a lot of different things, but a lot of stuff is situational, quirky, or mundane, so let's just focus on weapons here. Weapons are either melee or ranged, with melee weapons requiring a strength roll and ranged weapons requiring a presence roll. Each weapon deals a single die worth of damage, usually from a d4 to a d10. There are no modifiers to weapon damage, so once you hit, you're going to be rolling 1 die for damage. Damage is negated by armor, and armor can be found in 3 tiers. Armor counts as damage reduction, so when you take 3 points of damage from an attack and you're wearing armor, you'll roll the die associated with your armor tier and reduce the incoming damage by the result. Tier 1 armor reduces damage by d2. Tier 2 reduces by d4, and Tier 3 by d6. That said, Tier 2 and Tier 3 armor also inhibits your agility and your defense tests, so you're going to be a bit clunky and easier to hit in general if you go for bigger armor. That's the trade-off. Additionally, if you ever take a critical hit while you're in armor, you reduce the tier of your armor by 1. So Tier 2 armor becomes Tier 1 until it's repaired. In my experience, armor is absolutely massive for a character's survivability, and your big boss villain better have some sweet gear if you want them to survive at all. Batteries are also a thing for weapons and other equipment. Batteries hold 24 charges and can be recharged by being plugged in or drawing in solar energy somehow. Each energy weapon, like a blaster or an energy sword, uses a set number of charges each time you attack with it, meaning that it'll be a good idea to have a few different weapons on hand or to have some batteries to swap in and out. Transitioning away from the character sheet, let's continue to talk about combat. Just like in Mork Borg, you should expect a lot of combat in this game, but it's going to be very streamlined and simple. At the base level, it's gridless, so you won't be calculating feet or meters of movement, unless you really want to. To begin a combat, first start with initiative. The GM rolls a d6, and on a 1 to 3, all the enemies go first, and on a 4 to 6, the party gets the opportunity. I don't know if this is fully rules as written, but I like to re-roll this roll at the top of every round. So your team might go last in the previous round, but then get to go first in the next round, thereby giving you really 2 turns in a row, or you could get screwed and it could go the other direction. I also like avoiding rolling for individual initiatives. So just let the group decide who wants to go where in the team's initiative. On your turn, you can take a single action and traverse a normal sized room. Once combat begins, players will be rolling for both attacks and defense. All hits are determined by the roll of player dice. When a player character wants to hit a creature, they'll roll their attack, and unless the creature stat block says otherwise, the player is shooting for a 12 or better, with rules for critical successes and failures. When a game master attacks a PC with a creature, the player will make an agility test or a defense test for a weapon attacks and most often a presence test for neuromancy used against them, again shooting for a 12 unless the creature's stats say otherwise. Crits and fumbles are pretty cool in the system too, since all rolls are player-led. A natural 20 on an attack roll doubles your damage and reduces your enemy's armor tier by 1, while critting on a defense or agility roll means you get to make an immediate free attack, a counterattack. Rolling a 1 or a fumble is tragic though. Rolling a 1 on your weapon attack and your weapon is either dropped or malfunctions or is damaged, whatever the GM determines, and rolling a 1 on your defense and you end up taking that double damage and your armor go down by a tier as well. Hit points work very similar to D&D in that they are based off your toughness score. When you take a hit that reduces you to 0 hit points, you are broken and you roll on a broken table, which has results from falling unconscious to dying. If you manage not to roll death, you're still in the broken state and any further damage kills you outright. Simple as that. Now, rules as written, any damage that ever takes you below 0 hit points kills you outright. What I like to do instead, though, is say the first time you are hit with an attack that brings you to 0 hit points or lower, you stop at 0 and roll on the broken table. So you're always going to have like this bumper that you butt up against, and you never can just die outright from one single hit. Just this little bit of added survivability really helps while still keeping the game hella deadly. You recover hit points at a rate of D4 per time you sit down, catch your breath, take a drink, and D6 per restful sleep. Oh, did I forget to mention the worms? I did, didn't I? The parasitic worms infesting the galaxy can infest you too. It's probably going to happen to a chunk of your party before the end of any sizable campaign. There are 6 different worm strains, and at any time you're near an infected host, you're going to roll a d6, and if you get a 1 or a 2, you're going to become infected, and if you're injured, you're going to roll that twice. There's a whole section of what happens once you're infected, starting on page 66, but let me give you an overview. Number 1, it's not all bad. There's some great boons called parasitic pleasures that you might gain that could get that are kind of symbolizing your body and the worm working in harmony, and these will give you cool mechanical benefits. On the other side, you may also get a parasitic pain, which is a mechanical detriment as the worm is trying to take over. You're going to fight against this worm, or worms if you contract more than one strain, for the rest of your miserable life. So get used to it. And that's all I'm going to say about worms here. You should go check them out in the book. They're a key component to the setting and to the system at large. You're going to have a lot of fun getting infested and having worms. I saved the last few minutes here to talk about monster stat blocks. Now, we usually don't cover that in our how to play vids, but these are tightly constrained, so we can run through it in just a moment. Here's an Astro Zombie. Notice how small its stat block is. Hit points, morale score, which is basically how likely it is to flee from a fight. The lower it is, the more likely it is to flee. It's got an armor value, just like the players. It's got attack damage, remembering that all players roll defense scores when monsters attack, and by default, they just need to hit a 12 to succeed. So here you only have to worry about damage. And then there's GP, which is special rules for how the monster might deliver their grim parasites, if any. That's it. Nice, fast, and dirty. That's it, folks. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know we've already had a video from Mork Borg, and this one repeats several steps, but the reality is that dark, apocalyptic fantasy isn't going to be everyone's jelly of choice, and my extreme hope is that people stumble into this corner of the RPG space from all over the place, and now we have a sci-fi access point. If you like this video, consider subscribing to our channel or picking up a copy of the book from our web store, provided we have a copy in stock. They go fast sometimes. Finally, we have a podcast. It's called Geeks Can't, and it features myself and a couple of my Yahoo Game Master friends chatting about topics that came up at our game tables. We talk about Kickstarters, RPG news, and interview creators by the dozen. Go give us a listen if podcasts are your thing. It's also recorded live right here on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitch each and every week. You can expect a video like this about a different system every few weeks. And until then, we'll see you next time.